Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Good morning. How are you today? I hope you are doing well. So let me introduce myself. My name is Risma Rihadatul Aisyah. In this video, I would like to explain about the analysis of short story. The title is The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beth Potter.
These are the points that we will discuss in the analysis of this short story.
First, I will read the summary about the story, The Tale of Peter Rabbit from Beatrix Potter. Four rabbits, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter live with their mother on a sandbank below a tall fir tree. One day, old Mrs. Rabbit tells her children they may run in the field or play down the lane, but under no circumstance can they enter Mr. McGregor's garden. The rabbit father was caught in the garden and ended up in Mrs. McGregor's pie. Mrs. Rabbit tells them not to get into mischief, and she head off to the bakery to buy a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. The obedient Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail obey others and travel down the lane to pick blackberries. Peter, a naughty rabbit, disobeys his mother's orders and runs dry from Mr. McGregor's garden. He squeezes under the gate and eats lettuce, French beans, and radishes. Feeling ill from eating too much, Peter seeks parsley to calm his stomach. As Peter rounds a cucumber farm, he meets Mr. McGregor, who stops planting baby cabbage to chase after Peter with a rake. Terrified, Peter races through the garden but has forgot where the gate is. Peter loses one shoe in the cabbage patch and the other in the potato field. He accepts Mr. McGregor's running faster with all 4 legs. However, Peter's jacket button gets caught on a gooseberry net. Declaring himself lost, Peter cries. Hearing Peter's sobs, 3 friendly sparrows exhort him to get free, just as Mr. McGregor attempts to place a sieve over Peter's head. Peter wiggles out of the net and escapes. Leaving his jacket behind, he rushes into a tool shed and hides inside a water canister. Unfortunately, there is too much water in the can. Certain Peter is hiding in the shed. Mr. McGregor begins turning over flower pots in search of the rabbits. Peter sneezes and Mr. McGregor begins chasing him again. When Mr. McGregor tries to place his foot on Peter, Peter dashes through a window, knocking over 3 plates. Tried and unable to fit through the windows, Mr. McGregor goes back to work. Peter rests, breathless, terrified, and damp. He is unsure which direction he must go to return home. After a while, he wanders about. He finds a door in the wall, but it locks, and he is too fat to squeeze underneath the door. An old rat crouches after the stone doorstep, carrying pears and beans to her family resting in the woods. Peter asks the rat the direction to the gate, but the rat has such a large pie in her mouth and she cannot answer. The rat shakes her head at Peter and Peter begins to cry again. He makes his way across the garden but becomes increasingly confused. Peter arrives at a small pond where Mr. McGregor fills his watering cans. The cat sits very still, but everyone in a while her tail twices. Peter left the cat alone, departing without speaking to her, as he has heard about cats from his cousin Benjamin Bunny. Heading back toward the tool shed, Peter hears the sound of a huge tilling ground. He scurries under the branches and waits there for a time. Before long, he climbs into a wheelbarrow and sees Mr. McGregor in the field hoeing onions. Mr. McGregor's back is turned to Peter, and just beyond Mr. McGregor is the garden gate. Peter slowly and quietly climbs down from the wheelbarrow and runs as fast as he can. Mr. McGregor catches sight of Peter. Peter does not care, however, and slips underneath the gate to safety. Mr. McGregor used Peter's lost jacket and shoes to make a scarecrow to frighten away the bird eating his chop. Running home as fast as he can, Peter doesn't stop until he reaches the tall fir tree. Exhausted, Peter flops down on the soft sand and the floor of the rabbit's hole and closes his eyes. Mrs. Rabbit, busy cooking, wondered what Peter has done with his clothes. This is the second pair of clothes he has lost in the past 2 weeks. Peter falls ill during the evening. Mrs. Rabbit put Peter to bed, making him some chamomile tea. She gives Peter a tablespoon of tea and bedtime. Meanwhile, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail enjoy bread, milk, and blackberry for dinner.
The second, we will analyze about the characterization. In this story, there are 6 characters. First, Peter, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, Mrs. Rabbit, and Mr. McGregor. Peter as a main character. Peter is a naughty boy because he ignores message from his mother. He did not listen what his mother reminded him. And Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail they are obedient children because he obey what his mother says. Mrs. Rabbit has a very protective nature for her children because she doesn't want her children to be hurt. And the last is Mr. McGregor as an antagonist character. Next is setting of the story. The Tale of Peter Rabbit was published in 192 and place setting at Mr. McGregor garden and at Peter's house. Next is the theme of the story regarding obedience, motherhood, love, compassion, and nurturing. Regarding obedience, about obedience because children must obey the words of their parents. Mother's love, because of the love and affection given by Mrs. Rabbit. Next is point of view. The writer, a third person in his story, in the personification of Peter Rabbit, Beatrix Potter has created a character which children can easily relate to. Nothing is irresistible as something that is off limits, and Peter is no exception to his rule. Peter's wayward behavior in contrast of his sister Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were well-behaved little bunnies. And the last is plot. The plot of the story is very simple. Peter disregards his mother's instruction and trouble follows. Rising action begins as Peter enters the garden, and it comes to a climax when he encounters Mr. McGregor and it almost captured. What makes it so enchanting is the myriad of details it contains and the mini conflict along the way. When Peter gets tangled in the gooseberry net, hides in the wet watering can, loses his coat and shoes, and narrowly avoids the cat. The resolution to the conflict is achieved when Peter finds the garden cat once again. And that's all I can explain about the analysis of short story about the tale of Peter Rabbit. And I'm sorry if there are any mistake. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.